Thank you. I call to order the Public Works and Utilities Committee meeting on August 5th, 2024. It is 5:08. We are a little bit delayed. But if we could have a roll call, please.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Councillor Michael Garcia,
Present.
Councillor Romero Worth.
Excused.
Uh, Councillor Lee Garcia,
Present.
Councillor Amanda Chavez,
Here.
and Chair Amanda Chavez. Chair.
I am here either way.
Castro. So sorry. Councillor Castro
Presente.
and Councillor Chavez.
Here.
Thank you. You have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next is approval of the agenda. We do have some changes to the agenda. I will turn it over to staff for those changes.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Yes, there's one permanent change to the agenda, which is that item 7B is being removed to be presented at a later time when there's more accompanying information that the committee will want to see. And then there were a number of items pulled off consent. Would you like me to list those now?
We're not quite there yet. So if I could get a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Next is approval of consent agenda. And yes, we have lots of items pulled off. I will turn it over to Director Wheeler.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. The items that I believe have been removed off of consent for discussion, item 7B is in boy, J is in Jack, I is in indigo, M is in man, N is in Nancy, O is in opera, T is in Popeye, R as in run, Y as in yellow, alpha alpha, AA, and then AJ alpha J.
And just to clarify, B will not be discussed because we did amend the agenda by removing that item.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Of course. So all of the items mentioned other than B, that is being postponed to another time. Can I get a motion from the committee?
Moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Could I get a roll call vote, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Councillor Alma Castro,
Sí.
Councillor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
and Councillor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Chavez.
Yes.
Motion passes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Next is public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to come speak? And it looks like we do not have anyone. Next is presentation informational items. The first presentation we have today is Santa Fe Generating Station Environmental Remediation Status Update. We have Bill Schneider, Water Resources and Conservation Manager, here with us. Turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. This is a topic that should be fresh in your minds. I know we have a full agenda. I just want to hit on a couple of key points, please. As you can see from the photo before you, this is a water welling drill rig that is a specialized piece of equipment for collecting soil and water samples and installing monitoring wells for environmental purposes. Santa Fe Generating Station's has a long history. It's located with this black sort of polygon, but effectively in between the Santa Fe Indian School and the School of the Deaf. It's a property that, dating back to 1950, was used by PNM to essentially burn number 2 fuel oil to generate electricity. As part of that operation, there has been several documented environmental releases, leaky storage tanks. And so I want to come before the committee to provide a status update because there's a proposal to do some work in this area. A thing to point out and why the city and particularly the water division is highly engaged in this project is that red circle that is adjacent to the property. We have a water well that has had dissolved phase contaminants appear over the years. We've decommissioned that well temporarily while this environmental restoration efforts are underway. So I gave some history. So again, given this need for brevity, I will move forward to basically explain the issue at hand and then what these next steps entail. So this red halo sort of represents what's called the dissolved phase plume. So these fuel products will dissolve in water. Groundwater beneath the property migrates very slowly, hundreds of feet per year. But again, this release is very old, decades. And so the concern we have, as demonstrated by these blue arrows, is the risk and vulnerability to other city wells. As I mentioned, Santa Fe well is already impacted. The greater concern is the Agua Fria well, which is hydraulically down gradient. We've worked with NMED and PNM, who is the primary responsible party for this site, and have asked for new monitoring wells off-site to allow us to essentially assess that risk. And so after many years of discussion, those parties have agreed to install 3 monitoring wells off-site. But why I want to bring this to your attention is because now we're moving out into the neighborhoods. And so those 3 blue dots that are labeled, and I'll point them with my arrow, UST 57, 56, and 55 are going to be the locations where the drilling will take place. Very proximal to homes. So in the process, we've asked for a work plan. The NMED and PNM have provided. It's a very well designed work plan. It includes basically permitting from the state as well as the city. We authorize the location for the wells. We've asked for a safety plan, also a traffic plan, as well as a noise abatement plan. So they'll put blankets around this very large drill rig and will only operate during working hours. But with that, there will be disruption, I cannot deny. So with that stated, I've contacted and I've also requested that PNM contact the Sierra Vista Neighborhood Association, at least make them aware of this work. The intentions to start work on August 19th. Could go on for about 3 weeks, possibly. And basically, we will be in close communication. We're not party to this. The city, when they acquired the water system from PNM in 1995, the environmental liability stayed with PNM. However, given the risk to our water wells, we stay very engaged on this. So Marcos, myself, Jesse, John, and others are involved. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the committee? Comments? Counselor Michael Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for this very important update. I really appreciate it. So I guess my first question is, based off these 3 wells that are being proposed to be drilled, this is an older neighborhood. Are any of the residents in that neighborhood currently operating off of a well system?
Excellent question. Thank you, Counselor. The answer to your question is no. As part of this environmental work, they did a well survey. I actually have a map here I could show you, but ultimately, many of the wells in the neighborhood that were drilled have since gone dry, essentially. The water table has dropped, partly as a function because at this site for many years, there is what's called a pump and treat system where they were using the Santa Fe well to extract water out and run it through a treatment system, which lowered the water table. So maybe actually a positive.
Thank you for that. And I guess next steps after, how soon do we expect results from these 3 wells?
Typically, these reports have come in about 3 to 4 months. We'll get a preliminary draft assessment, particularly with the water quality data that we're most interested in.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess the reason for that is we've got some wells that are currently in use a little closer than these proposed wells. For example, the Agua Fria well and the Cañada test well. I guess the question is, are we planning to just kind of continuously drill wells as we get closer to those? I mean, I'm just trying to wrap my head around how we can really understand where the plume sits, how fast it's growing, and that way we can begin to appropriately plan for remediation, because you had said earlier, it could be hundreds of feet per year. That can, if we're far out, if these wells come up positive for having contaminants and we continue to push out, that is my concern, is that when, so I guess, Bill, my question is, why didn't we have like a close to where we know the contaminated area is, and maybe an intermediary point between that spot and the currently used wells, and in between, just that way we can have a better estimation of, so lots of questions and it.
Yeah, and thank you, Counselor and Chair. So those are so many excellent questions, and ones that myself and Marcos have been asking. I've been here almost a decade now, and we've been pushing for those very critical data gaps to assessing the nature and extent of this contamination. It's clearly undefined. The focus of this effort, as driven by PNM and the Environment Department, the city did not have a seat at the table. We can only make requests, which have been made in writing, for the very things you've asked. So I share your concerns. They have been focused for the past decade on trying to understand the extent, and I had mentioned this in a previous presentation, there's floating diesel fuel oil on the site about 250 feet below the ground surface. And it's kind of, I use the analog of if you ever picked up a bottle of Italian salad dressing in the store and you have the separation. So you have the floating diesel fuel on the water, and then water table below, and then you get what's called an emulsion and this dissolved phase plume, which is what we're trying to identify. With that said, their whole focus has been trying to define the nature of that floating oil and who are the responsible parties. PNM has claimed time again, and it's in our agreement with the purchase of the water system, that they do not admit to the liability. And so with that, this has been a very slow process.
There has to be some type of documentation that shows who contaminated the area, who is the property owner. We start with the property owner, prior property owner, and go backwards from there. And I guess the question is, are we beginning to have that litigation process where we hold whomever it is responsible and accountable for contaminating the area, and we don't know how much. I mean, because it could be this type of litigation could take years, if not decades, to go through. And the sooner we can begin to at least identify whom is responsible, the better, because you and I, Bill, might be retired long gone while the court case is still going on, and we want to make sure that we're providing the appropriate tools for whomever is in the seats that we currently occupy to ultimately bring forth the resources that are going to remediate this challenge. And especially when it comes to the contamination that we're seeing and the potential for it, I don't want to alert anybody, but we do in some sense, because there is the potential. We don't know the extent of the plume. From my understanding, Bill, we don't.
That's absolutely correct. I reinforce that point. I could share, Counselor, because I do think it's an excellent point that needs to be reinforced, that these next steps are critical. Having support of the governing bodies really helpful for the Water Division, because we do not have a lot of essentially out with the Environment Department to drive this process faster, which is your concern. We've been trying. It's being funded through what's called CAF, which is a corrective action fund. The state taxpayers are paying for this work at this point. So the question I would pose is maybe rhetorically is, once we get this data and I come back to the committee and we essentially have a snapshot of what potentially those risks are, maybe as collectively, the city may want to assert itself a little more on what those next steps might be. Because again, we've had 2 failed remediations here. And this investigation started in 1985.
Right. And so I guess what can be done in the now? I mean, months, we'll get the report, which I
Yeah.
definitely understand that, but I mean, if I'm not wrong, there is the Santa Fe well that's reported contaminated.
That's correct.
So there's already cause for us to enter into some type of remediation process. So would that look like a letter coming from the governing body? Should we pass a resolution? Because I'd want us to begin the process immediately. So you tell us, Bill, what would help you with the tools with the State Environment Department to begin to take one, to let them know we're taking this very seriously and they better begin to act expediently. Two, begin to be able to appropriately work with city staff to get not only the needs for these 3 wells, but potentially more wells done in a timely manner. Because if this has been going on since 1985, which is nearly 40 years ago, which is astonishing to me, that we don't have 40 years to wait. And this is not to your fault. This is,
Yeah.
you know, we don't have 40 years to wait. We need to take action now. And so I'll seek further guidance from you offline in how we can do that, because I think we need to take action.
Yes, thank you, Counselor. Thank you, Chair. I agree. And we are prepared to have that conversation when you're ready.
Okay, so thank you. I appreciate this. No other questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Snyder, for the presentation. And so what does it look like? I mean, to clean this up? I mean, is it even possible to clean this up? And what would be like the steps to do this once it's identified? Well, it's got to get cleaned. Once we identify who's responsible for it, even if it's, even if we can't come up with put the blame on one specific person, but it's got to get cleaned. So what are those steps? What does those steps look like?
Thank you, Counselor, Chair, members of the committee. So this is a milestone with respect to getting this information that will be collected, because it'd be the first time that we could assess the impacts offsite. So right now, with all the work that's been done, particularly in the past decade, they've been able to identify that effectively the highest concentrations of these chemicals are on site, which would imply they've come from an on-site source. Now they've essentially, from my perspective, have identified PNM as the responsible party. So the next steps will be to focus on what's called source treatment, which using technologies to try to target removing that fuel oil from beneath the ground surface. That's a very timely and expensive process. There's various technologies, which I'd be happy to get into if time would allow, but if not, I'll come back. The biggest piece, which affects the city of Santa Fe the most from my perspective, is this offsite. What is the nature and extent? How deep has it gotten? How far has it migrated offsite because of these offsite water wells? We've already sacrificed Santa Fe well. It's offline, been for a decade. Agua Fria is our best producing well in the city well field. So that's why we keep bringing this to the committee as an alarm that, yes, to your point, we need to be actively engaged in this process, because going through the CAF, that fund, that is used through the entire state of New Mexico. And it's a very slow process because they're only giving us a small portion. And so hence why it takes so long.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think we really want to go too deep into it. Do we know when the last time that there was actively contaminants being introduced into that area?
Well, so they've done record searches on site and off site. Like there's Department of Transportation across the street that had storage tanks. There was the old Hanstein fuel depot once upon a time. Like, so there was more than one potential source. So to answer your question, the last known release was in the 1950s. 16,000 gallon tank leaked its entire contents. And so it's possible it's moved down and we're now finally seeing it. Things move
The
slow.
water, okay. Yeah, I think it's something that we really need to hopefully get to a point where we know that we need to take action and start remediation and start cleaning this up. And I know it ends up at, eventually it's the taxpayers that are gonna pay for this. But we do have to look at it from the perspective of, not allowing our other wells to be decontaminated, and, I think time is of the essence. So, thank you for the presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Counselor Garcia. Counselor Alma Castro.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I just have a few questions, Mr. Schneider. Now, I know we are recommending that PNM contact residents. Is the city going to hold any type of public meeting or talk to residents about the potential dangers?
I've asked that question internally, and because this is driven by the Environment Department, we felt as though it was their project that they should be conducting that. So that's, I guess, the position I've taken, that but I'm happy to explore it further. What will happen if we do go that route is obviously a delay.
It would be in the best interest of the city to possibly inform the community of the risks. That could also help in maybe pressuring PNM to take a little bit of responsibility, but thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Counselor. And I was going to comment on the same thing. I feel like because it affects our community members, it is our responsibility to inform them, offer some type of education. And I feel like once the community knows, there will be more pressure. Part of community involvement is them showing up, them making noise, their voice being heard, them kind of making us aware in a very urgent way because it impacts them. And I think it might actually possibly speed things along. But yeah, since they are our constituents, I think it's our responsibility to provide them the information. So exploring that I think would be beneficial. Something that I know I would want an update on once you kind of explore what the options are for some community awareness on the situation.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. So I'm taking this as a directive. I will notify the Environment Department and PNM that basically we are requesting a public meeting. We will not authorize the drilling because we issued the permit. So I'll hold that up until we can have our public meeting. And is there any other actions you would like?
Counselor Michael Garcia.
Not necessarily an action, but just Mr. Schneider, let them know that we're requesting for the meeting to be held, and if they're not willing to hold it, we'll hold it ourselves. And we would like for them to be a stakeholder at the table to figure out how we move forward with this, but if they're not willing to host such a meeting, I mean, I know we've got experts such as yourself, Mr. Martinez, that can help provide information to the public. I think if they're not willing to do it, there's nothing that holds us back from holding such a meeting as well.
And I think that it also, thank you, Counselor. I think that the reality is once this starts occurring and kind of disrupting things, they're going to come to us anyway. So they're going to want answers from us, and we're going to be the ones that deliver those answers because we know they're not going to get it from anywhere else. So us just being ahead of it and making that connection and being a point of contact, I think it's our responsibility. So setting up some process or something so that that can occur and we're ahead of it and not just being bombarded by our community members that weren't made aware properly, that are now experiencing a disruption, is appropriate. Anything else from the committee? Thank you so much, Mr. Schneider, for being here. Next presentation is Backflow Prevention Program Overview. Justin Gonzalez, Cross Connection Specialist, is here with us to present this presentation.
There we go. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Justin Gonzalez, and the cross-connection specialist for the city's drinking water division. We are looking to implement a city ordinance that would require testing and installation of backflow prevention devices on certain facilities and types of water delivery within our city. Just a presentation, kind of giving you a information on it all. Backflow is an undesired reversal of water through our water system from the customer side back into our delivery lines. This typically can be caused by a change in water pressure from either a main break or from a overusage in the system, like if there were a massive amount of water being taken out of hydrants for a fire, let's so to say, and it was more pressure taken out than put in. This can pose a threat to our system just due to not knowing what's always on the other side of the customer's line or what's in the customer's line. And, you know, we're really only responsible up to the meter. Backflow prevention program would, you know, kind of second what's required by the plumbing code, being that new construction and in-place construction with fire systems and irrigation systems already require backflow prevention, but it kind of gets lost there. There's no annual testing or kind of upkeep with it. And then not only that, when properties change hands, you know, we no longer know the original, I mean, what was ever originally intended for that to be done could be a new system or whatever's being used by the customer. Sorry. Rio Rancho, Las Cruces, Los Alamos, and Albuquerque already have backflow programs in place. Some going back as far as 2008, which would be, you know, Albuquerque. And actually thinking back on that, I think Las Cruces implemented a program in the late 90s, early 2000s. And nationwide, you know, backflow occurrences have happened as far back. I mean, they've happened since water delivery was a thing. And within the state of New Mexico, you know, we've had a few. In 1990, Tucumcari, New Mexico had an industrial plant backflow with some of the cooling water system water, and that went into the drinking water supply. And even locally, residents of Zocalo, I believe back in 2014, 2016, some residents became ill because a fire system backflow device was bypassed and contaminants from the actual fire system were going back into the system and got a couple people sick. Maybe to reiterate, backflow prevention devices are required on fire systems, irrigation systems. Any customers that also have a well on their property and are commercial and wholesale customers. We have roughly 500 systems, 500 fire systems and 500 irrigation systems, and about 1,000 commercial systems currently now that either have backflow devices installed or that do need them put in. And this program would ensure that they all have them installed and that they're testing them annually and that they are the proper one needed for whatever potential hazard they may pose to our water system. And we do get alerts through our internal software that manages meter flow. And in this diagram, you can see, I'll use my cursor. Maybe it doesn't show up, but there's there's water below the zero line. And in this particular case, I went out to investigate and there was a private well it was connected to the house and it was actually overpressuring our system and putting water into it. And the customer was pretty cool. And they installed in this second picture in the middle, they actually installed an RPZ backflow preventer and, that took care of it. And there may be quite a few more places where this would have to be put in place. Another kind of around town example would be the El Castillo Life Plan community. And the brown box is the actual containment for the backflow device. And, they've painted that to kind of take away any attention because, it's not aesthetically pleasing, but inside, it's just a 8-inch service and it does have heat source to keep it warm for the winter months. And that's another thing that would be, taken care of or during an annual inspection to make sure that it's working, because that does happen, that the heat source goes out, we get a busted line, and we've got a leak in the middle of winter. And this is kind of a typical irrigation backflow with the water flowing from left to right. And yeah. And this would be a example of a commercial backflow prevention device installed on a water and ice dispensing machine. And, the potential threat could be, maybe not having the ice machine or the water machine properly cleaned or maintained and growing some type of bacteria that could, potentially get back into our system. So the RP design, actually, when there's backflow present on it, it just dumps onto the ground rather than going into our system. And then the fun stuff of costs and revenue, our financial, our FIR came up with these numbers. I think that's about where I'm at. Sorry.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Counselor Castro?
Thank you so much for the presentation. We
Sure.
appreciate it. I do have a couple questions about this slide.
Sure.
Now, when it says costs, personnel and benefits, are we going to have to bring on new staff to sort of implement the program? Talk to me about these costs.
Right now, this is just me. Yeah. Down the road, it possibly could be more people, I would think. This is a big job and, we've got to roll it out correctly.
Perfect. And is this position currently funded, fully funded?
I'm going to defer to Jesse about.
Yes, Madam Chair, Counselor, we are already paying this essentially because we brought Justin on to stand up the program.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And my other question had to do with the fact that we do already have some of these, but that was addressed in a previous slide. So no further questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions? Counselor Lee Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. A question in regards to, so this would pertain to all new construction?
And existing.
And so existing commercial buildings, residential, or it just depends on?
Mainly just fire services, irrigation services, and commercial services. If there was a residential line that, we deemed as a potential threat, we would require it. And a residential would actually be someone that had a well, like that one slide with a, here I can go back to that. With this customer who had a well on the property that was still hooked up to the house, that is a potential threat.
So what would trigger, just to say, an office building to have to put something like this in place?
The diameter of the line and what type of office building it was, if it was over 2 stories, that would be another reason to have a backflow preventer on it.
And how about square footage?
No.
Not- So we don't have a criteria as to what would meet that, make the person or make the business have to put in a backflow prevention?
The criteria right now would just be anything 2 inches and above delivery line. water service delivery line.
Right? Do we kind of know how many businesses across town that would be?
Yeah, I think right now it's in the ballpark of about 1,000.
Well, how would it work when, well, again, a business that maybe was established 40 years ago or something? There's a lot of things that I can think of in regards to, maybe we can connect offline in regards to who would be affected, but just interested in kind of seeing who, when it comes to new construction versus existing buildings that would have to adhere to this new ordinance. That's kind of where my concern is, and how we would make existing businesses do the construction, so to speak.
Through this program, they're already kind of required by code to have them in place, and we're just kind of following up that they're getting tested annually, because that's kind of what happens now. They get installed initially and then they fall by the wayside, and they either sometimes get removed, bypassed, or they're no longer the correct type. So they get brought up to date.
Thank you. And so I guess it would also go back to possibly businesses that were constructed, especially in our areas that were annexed. They didn't have to adhere to something like this back when when they were not in the city. And so I guess, again, and the other areas to think about in regards to how we would go about helping business along understand that this is something that needs to be done. Aside from that, just keep that on your radar.
Point of information.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Castro?
So just to be clear, these are regulations that businesses, for example, already have to have this prevention system. We're just making sure that it is functioning correctly. Is that correct? Right?
Correct.
Thank you. And what is the approximate cost of installation of the system? Do we know?
Of a backflow preventer on a system, that can be anywhere from about probably $2,000 up, just depending on the size of the water line and where it's installed.
Perfect. No further questions.
Thank you, Counselor. Thank you for the presentation, Justin. Appreciate it. Next, we are moving on to our consent items that have been pulled. Our first one is going to be 7J. And if I miss one, please yell at me. So item J, request for approval of a budget amendment resolution to allocate $969,389 from the Community Development Fund and $3 million from the general fund for a total amount of $3,969,389 in available balances to support affordable housing trust fund activities. We don't have Johanna here. Was this pulled by you, Counselor Garcia? Okay, I will turn it over to you. Thank you for being here.
Madam Chair, excuse me. Johanna Nelson was going to try to join by the Zoom meeting, and Joshua, if you can hear me in the back, I'm on Zoom, but I'm not a panelist, so I can't see if Johanna is waiting to join the meeting. I'm being promoted, so I'll be able to see in a minute.
And we also do not have screens here if she is available, so.
And she is, Joshua. So let's see if we could get the screens turned on with the Zoom on it. I think Johanna will be able to join Director Randall to present on this item. And she has her hand up.
Welcome, Johanna. We're just trying to get our screens up and running. If you can hear me, just give us a second.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Okay, there we are. All right, so I am going to turn it over to Counselor Michael Garcia as he pulled this item off.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Joanna and Director Randall for being here. If I would have known you were here, I would have pulled your items. I actually was going to pull your items on Wednesday, so I'll chat with you offline about the other separate stuff, but
Thank you. I
here to
look
talk
forward to
about
that.
affordable housing right now. So So this request is ultimately requesting to move $3.9 million. And based off of the RFPs that were issued and the resources that were going to go out the door, that was $3.877 million roughly. So I guess my question is, how come the numbers necessarily aren't matching up? Why are we requesting more than what is in the current or proposed to be issued through the RFP?
Madam Chair, Counselor Garcia, thank you for the question. And I see Andy Hopkins walking up. My understanding is this is an amount to a budgetary accounting item, and I'd love to turn it over to Andy to give us further detail.
All right. Thank you, Andy.
Madam Chair, Counselor Garcia, this bar only has a tangential relationship to the RFP. It's not necessarily directly connected to the RFP. The $3 million, I think you all know about. It's been several times discussed in council and budget review hearings. That was meant to be a stopgap measure until the affordable housing excise tax kicked in, which now is in doubt because of the court case. The $969,000 is basically an amount that was cut from the budget immediately during the operating budget, and decided that that portion had to come from one-time funding in order to present a balanced budget as required by the state. So the plan was, when this $3 million came in from the general fund, Affordable Housing Trust Fund would have enough in the bank to restore that $969,000 that was cut during the budget process. So the $969,000 is part of the RFP that was initiated for the $3.877 million, I believe it was, something along those lines.
Yeah.
So that's basically making that contract amount whole in the budget, and the $3 million basically allows that $969,000 to come back into the budget.
Okay, thank you, Andy. And so ironically enough, and so I've got the numbers from 2016 to 2023 in regards to the amount of resources for the in lieu of fees collected. And the number is the exact same amount. So this current bar is requesting to allocate $969,389 from the Community Development Fund. And in 2023, at least from the information I was provided, we collected $969,782 from fee in lieu. So this is where the numbers are just, if I think it would be really, really helpful and beneficial to get an audited breakdown of the revenues coming in to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund through the fee in lieu, the additional revenues that have been allocated through either it's through sale of land or through the $3 million appropriation we've been given, and then see how the money is going out the door and how much money is still being left, because I still can't see the numbers, how they're matching up and how we are. And I know you're a budget whiz and makes a lot of sense to you, but from my perspective, and I want the public to be crystal clear on how we are utilizing the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, because that is one of the biggest concerns I heard from folks, especially when we were looking at the 3% increase of how are we going to be able to manage that? And I want to be able to prove to the community, look, this is how we're doing it. And through the current allocations of, the 3.8 million, but the income of whether it's the $969,000 and then previous years of 3 million. I just would love to get the breakdown of that, and if probably a presentation would be the best format, Andy, just that way we can say in 2020, we allocated this much to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. This is the revenue coming in. This is how we got it out the door. And so on and so forth, because this year we can see how we're allocating the 3.8 million, but from my numbers coming in, just off the bat, we've got 3 million from the 3 million that we should have from this one time, less than roughly $969,782. And so that is in excess of the 3.8 that is being allocated out, which would still leave roughly $100,000. And again, this is just for my kind of penciling out the budgets, and I think this is where it'd be helpful.
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, a couple of points. The $969,000 that you saw earlier in there, that is an 100% complete coincidence. There is absolutely no relationship between those two numbers. They just happen to be very similar. But the 969,000 in this bar that you're seeing today was just the amount that we needed to cut out of the budget to present a balanced community development fund. So there was absolutely no relationship to any other number. That was just the over under that we needed to get to present the community development fund a budget in a non-deficit position. Now, as one of the things that's a little bit confusing about this is the 969,000, even though the total bar is $3.969 million, the actual amount big going into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is 3 million, and of that 3 million is where that 3 million is going to be partially, or is going to be where that 969,000 comes from. So it's really not an addition of 3.9 million. It's an addition of $3 million going into the fund, most of which, a little over 2 million, is going to be supporting the fund for some future years. The 969,000 portion of the 3 million is going to fund the RFPs for the current year. But you know, even though it's all on the bar and the way the bar has to be presented, it looks like, oh, we're increasing it by 3.9 million. No, not really. What we're doing with $3 million is supporting the fund, irrespective of any actual expenses that may be added to it. The $3 million is mainly to support the fund and keeping the fund in good shape. The 969,000, it was basically a reversal of the temporary stopgap measure we had to do to present to the state a balanced budget. And now that the 3 million is coming in, the 3 million will support the addition of the 969,000. So and I know it's complicated, it's hard to explain that very well, but think of the 969,000 as a subset of the 3 million. The 969,000 is coming out of the 3 million.
I think this is where a presentation would be helpful because,
Yes.
again, just from the way I see the information, right, is that not only are we proposing for 3 million to go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, right?
Right.
We're proposing that $969,000 be moved from another fund, the Community Development Fund, into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, right? So that's 3.9 million. That's what it's kind of stating here, though, is for.
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is part of the Community Development Fund. So they are one and the same fund. There are other sub-funds within the Community Development Fund, but Affordable Housing Trust Fund is in the Community Development Fund. They are the same fund.
Gotcha. Okay, understandable. So that was already $900,000 that was in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We had to cut it to make the numbers work, which I've got questions within myself, I'll set some, because that to me is why do we have to, if we have the money, why are we having to say it's not there, so to speak, to make the budget line up? So that is kind of, but still, we're,
I understand
Yeah.
it's very confusing and we will be presenting something to you. But think of it this way. I've got to pay my car insurance this month. It's $200. I get a paycheck from the city of $1,000, and that $1,000 comes in, allows me to pay the $200. It also allows me to pay other things. But the $3 million is like my paycheck coming in. And with that paycheck coming in, I can afford, amongst other things, I can afford the $969,000 to restore the budget to its original request level.
gotcha.
So
And then so would, using that analogy, what the fee in lieu of costs, the 967,000, would that be considered like a bonus? I mean, how does that factor into the equation?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, that is part of the overall funding picture for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but it does not come near to covering the full cost of the RFPs. You probably saw the amount coming in. It's in the several $100,000 range, but the contracts year by year in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund are in the multi-millions of dollars. So that certainly helps. The fee in lieu is part of the overall funding picture, but it by no means covers all the money coming out of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It's it's not extra money. It's part of the money that we count on to fund the RFP contracts coming out. So it's not like we could say, oh, the amount of fee in lieu for FY25 is $100,000. So we have another $100,000 to work with. Yippee! No, that $100,000 makes up part of the overall revenue picture that funds the existing contracts in there.
Gotcha. And I think it's so complicated, a presentation on this is probably needed. So with that, no other questions. Thank you, Andy. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a quick question and just a quick spin off of that. Because, when we went through budget hearings, $3 million was, I asked the question in finance committee hearings of $3 million and it was, oh, we're putting it in there. And we passed that budget. And now we're coming back and saying, well, we're pulling this out of one-time funding, which wouldn't the original budget have appropriated $3 million? And I think that would go to you, Mr. Hopkins, since you're here.
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, the reason that was pulled out of our operating budget is the operating budget is dealing with recurring funding. It's dealing with funding that comes in year by year and is expected to be there, every year, somewhat like clockwork. Whereas the reason it was pulled out and put in as part of the $3 million is because that is coming from one-time funding. In other words, it's coming out of cash reserves in a general fund that are not renewable. Think of it as a renewable resource. You've got, let's say the operating budget is powered by solar energy, a renewable resource. The one-time money is like gasoline. Once it's gone, it's gone. It's not going to be renewing itself.
And I understand that, but again, I guess that when we're gonna approve, when we went back and approved our fiscal 25 budget, obviously it was appropriated for that. Did we not know at the time where it was coming from?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, yes, we did know where it was coming from, but the decision was made by budget and by the senior administration to present this and all the other one-time spending as a separate presentation. Generally, the annual operating budget does not, for the most part, does not deal with one-time money. It deals with recurring money, things like personnel, things like GRT, where the money is coming in year by year and the personnel are funded year by year. Whereas the things on this list of one-time bars are really being funded by cash and other non-renewable resources. We're
Right,
basically-
so in future years, we'll have to figure out again where we're gonna get $3 million.
Madam Chair, Counselor Garcia, that is correct. That is going to be a really tough one, if the excise tax does not come back in some form. Then if we, unless we raise taxes or something to pay for it, then this $3 million may not be sustainable without incurring significant cuts in other city operations, laying off parks employees, laying off recreation employees, canceling programs, shortening hours at libraries and recreation centers. Because we also have very large increases to insurance that are probably going to continue next year. And B, we have the final phases of the class and comp increases for city employees, which, if I remember correctly, are going to add approximately $16 million to the overall budget next year. So it's quite possible that we will not be able to fund the $3 million in the FY26 budget without either tax increases or significant cuts to other areas.
Okay, thank you. And again, back to my original question is that we're budgeting for this already, and where was it coming from? I think we were expecting this excise tax to go through and just kind of put the cart before the horse with a lot of hope, and that hasn't happened. And so again, what do we do if this doesn't go through? We're still waiting on decisions from courts and so on and so forth. So
Right. Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, it's a very good exemplar of the old adage, if you want to make God laugh, make a plan. A budget is a plan, and we try to give God something to laugh about it every year.
very good enough.
Keep him entertained.
Thank you. No further questions.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Lee Garcia. Counselor Castro?
It just seems to me that there are a lot of questions and we have asked for a presentation a couple times. So I don't know if we're ready to be voting on this bar right now. I'm going to make a motion to move this to a date certain, which would be the 19th, our next meeting. In a second.
I'll second for discussion.
All right, I do have a few comments, but is there anyone that wants to discuss the motion right now?
Yeah.
Counselor Michael Garcia?
I guess, Mr. Hopkins, I don't know if it'd be for you or for whom it would be.
Just stay down here for us, if you don't mind, Andy.
Sorry, Andy, getting those steps in. I guess time sensitivity, given that these RFPs, and this was my concern when we issued the RFPs without having the money in the bank account, so to speak. Time sensitivity, if we were to delay this for 2 weeks, would it put any of these awards in jeopardy?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, I'm afraid I'd have to refer that to Johanna. I do not know.
That's all I have.
If I could just comment, I think that we have overall questions around the Affordable Housing Trust and how all the money within that is working and moving. I actually would recommend that a presentation not only go to finance on that, but also quality of life. So all of us can be exposed to that process, because I feel more confused now than I was before. And it's probably because you got this down so much and you explain it so well, but I don't understand it. I think I have some questions. I don't know if it's necessary to postpone this item, though. I think that it's needed either way, and the understanding that we lack around this is greater than just this item here. That's my opinion. I feel like we can move forward with a vote, but we have this motion on the table right now, so we will go through that. But I don't necessarily agree with postponing. I think our questions are far greater than just this item. I don't know if anyone else has anything else to say about that before we do a roll call, or?
Well, I am interested in Councilor Garcia's question. What is the time sensitivity? And I think Director Nielsen had her hand up.
Director Nielsen?
Madam Chair, Member Castro, thank you for raising this issue. I agree. I think that time sensitivity is of essence. And so we can definitely follow up and get you the timelines of the many contracts that this affects by postponing your vote.
Okay, in that case, I will withdraw my motion.
All right, do we have another motion the committee would like to make?
Move to approve.
Second,
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Could I get a roll call vote, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
C.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Chavez,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Randall, and thank you, Mr. Hopkins, for being here. Johanna, thanks for being here. Thanks for connecting. Next is item L, correct?
Aye. Ice
Aye.
ice cream.
Item I. Request for approval of the New Mexico Department of Transportation Aviation Division Grant number SAF-24-06 in the amount of $56,200 for a partial funding for the construction of a new electrical vault. And we have Mr. Harris here, airport manager, to answer any questions. And this was pulled by Counselor Garcia, so I turn it over to you.
Hello, Mr. Harris, how are you? Good. Can you just help us understand why this is so important for the airport as it's moving forward?
I think your mic is off. If you want to just light that green. Perfect. Thank
There we
you.
go. Thank you, Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia. So the airfield lighting vault powers, it's basically our power distribution center for the airfield as a whole. The runways, the taxiways, the signs, various navigational aids, and everything else that we need to power for pilots to be able to land safely at the airport. It hasn't been touched in about 30 years. Some of our regulators that actually send the power out to those lights, they are beyond their useful life. We have one that's completely inactive. So we had to figure out a way to get runway lights on one of our small runways. But this project, it's going to add some LEDs for better, what's the word I'm gonna?
Efficiency.
Efficiency. There we go. I knew it was a word. Yeah. So it's just to upgrade the regulators and all the lights.
Great. And I think my next question, just to make sure I'm understanding, this is coming from DOT funding.
It's actually coming, so the bulk of the money is coming from the FAA. This is an FAA grant project. But with that, there's different percentages that are paid. So the FAA will pay 93.75% of this project, which is $1 million project, basically. The New Mexico DOT will put in 5.62%, and then the airport will put in 0.63%.
Well, kudos to you. I just want to point out the fact going after the resources externally really helps us as we're trying to figure out how to allocate some of the limited amount of resources that we do have. So congratulations to you, Mr. Harris. No other questions, Madam Chair. Move to approve.
Any other questions from committee?
Second,
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Could I get a roll call vote, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Aye.
Counselor Castro,
C.
Chair Chavez.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Harris. All right, next is item M. Request for approval of a budget amendment resolution to allocate $570,000 from the general fund available balance to fund the lease of 8 mobile live view technology camera trailers to enhance security during city events. Eric Candelaria, ITT Department Director, is here to answer questions. And Counselor Garcia, this is you as well, correct?
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Candelaria, for being here. First question, do you know how many of these mobile live view technology camera trailers the city currently has?
Madam Chair and Councilor Garcia, we currently have 4. Last fiscal year, we did a lease pilot program. for the or for the police department as well as constituent services. We found that more departments were asking for some of those mobile cameras. And so this year we were asking for more money so we can kind of suffice that need.
Okay, and so this would not be to lease, but it would be to full-on
These would-
purchase?
Yes, to correct, Madam Counselor, Counselor Garcia, this would be for us to actually own the equipment. And then also be able to take advantage of a few more tools that we'll be able to get to use out of them, such as audible announcements, flashing warning lights, as well as the ability to provide automatic response from third-party people if we need to.
Gotcha, gotcha. And you brought up something that I was gonna bring up later, but since you brought it up now, address the automatic announcements. I believe we've got a camera downtown on the plaza that does automatic announcements, and I've heard some concerns from folks around it that it's
Yes.
very intrusive, and is there a reason? I mean, this is probably not a question for you, but I would, you know, especially in a location such as that, and you've got visitors on the plaza and you hear this very big brother voice
Yeah.
talking down upon them, it's not very welcoming.
Agreed. Madam Chair, Counselor Garcia, that's another reason we're going with a purchase of these because we currently lease them. So we don't have access to turn those on and off when we want to.
Gotcha. Okay. And then I guess the last question around this is, these are very useful tools. I've worked with PD in the past. I know primarily because they were the users or the owners of them. But in whether it is dealing with nuisance properties or issues where there might be high crime, it's very, very helpful. So I think my question is there going to be a prioritization of the use? And how would somebody be able to reach it? Would they reach out to Director Candelaria and say, we want one of these in our neighborhood? Or does it get, the request gets filtered through PD? How are we going to determine who ultimately has access to these?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Counselor Garcia, that's a great question, and that's something that we're internally working now on that policy and that procedure. Currently, right now, for the 4 that we have, if we do get one back, they do come through us. But we don't really want to be that bottleneck because we don't know where they go, right? So I think it's going to be kind of a way for us to create that policy and that procedure so it's repeatable and consistent.
And then the last question is just around data storage, because with the camera, you're constantly collecting data. And just want to make sure that any data the city collects is safe and secure. So what is the ultimate process for the data collection and storage of the information that's collected through these devices?
Madam Chair, Counselor Garcia, so we again own the data. So it's a SaaS solution, it's cloud-based. It's our data for 30 days. And then once it is removed, we no longer have, it gets removed from the cloud. So if we do need data for historic potential or reasons, we can always download that data to a local infrastructure so we can have access to it.
Okay. No other questions, Madam Chair. Move to approve. Oh, sorry, Counselor.
Counselor Lee Garcia.
And Madam Chair, just really quick, what's the lifespan of these cameras or these systems that we're investing in?
So these currently have Madam Chair, Counselor Lee Garcia, we currently have, since these are leased, they own everything based on them or as part of the lease. Let me get logged in here. These IT people and their security. So currently the total with everything comes in cost for about, we're going to be paying about $1,400 per year for the fees for the SaaS piece. So those will probably last about 4 years that we'll get out of them. We are going to warranty them to the highest degree. Part of that is if something goes wrong with them, they'll be replaced because of the warranties that are in place with them.
And that's, I guess, is this better for us other than, so we're not purchasing cameras were leased, this is a lease, correct?
No, these we
are
are
purchased.
purchasing these ones.
Right, so that versus the lease, my understanding is the lease, they would replace parts and keep them up versus cameras that we purchase. What's the longevity of these and in the future, will they be available to repair and those type of things?
Yes, so Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia. So part of that is really part of the lease comes with that, but when we purchase them outright, we purchase them including hardware or hardware warranties, and that's what will replace those things as they default. Again, what we're doing is trying to go away from the procurement method that procurement says we shouldn't be doing is leasing equipment. We should be owning that equipment. So we're just trying to follow that, but we're trying to ensure that we're going to be able to maintain them and upgrade them as we needed to, and that's the basis of the warranties.
Okay, yeah, no, and I think that's important to have the warranties and make sure that when they do break, because obviously everything breaks at some point or another, that we're covered and that we can get them back online quickly as possible. Those are my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor Garcia. Counselor Castro?
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I do have a couple questions about the 4 units that we currently are leasing. So I know some of them have gotten damaged. What's the turnover on some of those repairs currently?
Madam Chair, Councilor Castro, so they're on a pretty 24-hour support on-call basis. So as we need them repaired, they will come out and repair them, and the same process will follow for the purchase ones, the ones that we do purchase.
So they should be up and running within 24 hours if any of them are damaged?
Yeah, unless there's a piece of hardware that they can't get, our hope is to get them quickly as quick as possible.
And in the past, do you have any reference for how long that turnover has been?
Not that I know of. I don't know, EJ. Yeah, usually about 10 days.
About 10 days. Okay, thank you. My other question was, my understanding is we have a state contract with one of those over at the Kit Carson obelisk. Is that true?
That I don't have any knowledge of. So I just know of the 4 that we have that are maintained by IT.
So, sorry, Chief Joy, I know that you're in the room. My understanding is that one of the cameras that is here at the Kit Carson obelisk says Santa Fe Police Department. Is that one of our 4 cameras?
Thank you, Chief.
Hi there, Madam Chair, Counselor. That was one of our cameras. We're letting them use that in partnership with us.
And so that's one of the 4 that we are currently leasing?
It's not on the.
That is a separate one.
It is off, it's off warranty for lack of a better term. So these
Do we
it's part of
own
an
that one?
older camera. It is, we own that camera, but it's not on the current system that our IT director is speaking to.
Okay, perfect. And since I have you up there, my understanding is some of our current cameras are for the police department and some are for constituent services. Is that correct?
I can't speak for constituent services.
I am so sorry. Does the Santa Fe Police Department currently have some of the leased cameras?
We are borrowing them. Yes, ma'am.
How many of them?
It's 4. I think currently it's 4.
So all 4 of them are currently with the Santa Fe Police Department.
But if it's how do you say, if another priority comes up and they need them, then they win. So they're,
So this is something that's just floating throughout the city and they just happen to
they aren't
be. at
our
this-
cameras, but they're letting us use them. I don't know if I was explaining that very well. So yeah, if they have a priority that they need them for, then they win, they get those cameras.
So right now, the priority for the city of Santa Fe for those cameras is the Santa Fe Police Department.
Correct.
Perfect. Thank you so much. No further questions.
Thank you. I just have a question for a comment that you made. You said that you are coming up with a process or procedure on how these get requested and assigned. And you said that you're hoping that it's not through IT or there's conversations that it won't be through that department. Are there departments that have been identified that would be more appropriate in managing that process?
So, Madam Chair, and committee, we're looking to implement an IT governance committee using the big mega departments for the city that will help determine that type of access.
All right, yeah, I would like to just be informed on how those discussions are going. I'm curious where that responsibility will land exactly. All right, do any other questions, comments?
I'll second that motion.
So we have a motion and a second. If we could get a roll call vote, please.
Yes, Madam Chair. Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
Aye.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Chavez.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Candelaria, for
Thank
being
you.
here.
Thank you.
All right. Next item two. All right, so we got to keep you. It is item N, request for approval of a budget amendment resolution to allocate $500,000 from 1/2 GRT increment for infrastructure fund and $2,542,700 from the GRT special revenue fund for a total amount of $3,042,700 in available balances to fund consulting costs related to the city's enterprise resource planning, ERP, system implementation and upgrades. All right, Counselor Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Candelaria, quick question. Can you explain to the public what the enterprise resource planning system is all about?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, this, I guess, piece of money is just used to upgrade and update and keep our ERP, our enterprise resource planning application platform running, which is Munis. So it allows us to implement additional modules, upgrade existing modules, and update to current versions of our backplane for our ERP system.
Okay, thank you. Just because a lot of folks might not know what it is. So my question is, this is a known expense. Why was this not included in the operating budget?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, I believe this was a change that was done by finance. Maybe they can speak to that a little bit clearer than I could. I can tell you how we'll spend that money, but the moving of,
I appreciate, I know how we're spending it. It's just that this is an expense. We know it's coming, and I think I'm, my concern with this one-time funding is that it's not like we don't know our expenses ahead of us, and we're now counting our chickens before they hatch. And it's a very dangerous situation to put our government in if we're saying, well, we're going to cut here because we know I have this reserve funding here, so we're just going to pad it later. So I'll let you, Mr. Hopkins, let me learn a little more why we cut it when we knew this was going to be an expense.
Madam Chair, Counselor Garcia, this is not exactly what I would call cutting it as part of the operating budget. You may recall from past years, we present an operating budget separate from a CIP budget. This ERP funding is considered CIP, in other words, a multi-year project. Therefore, it goes through a different approval process because operating funding is considered for 1 year only, whereas CIP funding may go on for several years until the project, as it were, is terminated. And just to add to what Director Candelaria said before, the ERP is consisting not only of the Munis system, it also includes the HCM personnel management system that HR uses. It includes EnerGov used by the planning and land use. And I believe the Kronos time management system is also considered part of the overall ERP family, or at least this allocation, this ERP fund does have some funding for consultation for Kronos as well. But it's really just a question of the nature of the funding. It's not that we didn't know about it before and, oh yeah, we need to include it. This is a CIP allocation. So just similarly as if, when Regina would bring forward a grant or a CIP project to resurface Guadalupe Street, that is a CIP expense, and it goes through a different process than the normal operating budget, because the operating budget is really concerned with day-to-day keeping the lights on, keeping employees paid. And this is really a separate type of allocation and a separate process.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hopkins. I appreciate that. And so looking at the further breakdown of how this money is planned to be expended, looks like half of it is for service contracts. 1.4 is for consulting, 1.5 service contracts. And this is, as mentioned, these are systems that aren't going away, so to speak. My question is, what capacity is being built? Because I would hope that we can put ourselves in a position where the consulting fees are going down because we won't necessarily need them as much. And especially the service contracts could be wiped out because those are duties taken by internal staff. So is there a plan to not be reliant on the service contracts and allow for staff to actually do the work that we're paying the contractors to do?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia. Part of that implementation is building up enough. So when I got to the city, there was a couple of projects that were still lingering because we didn't have sufficient resources to implement those as a whole. So we're going to leverage this money to actually bring in the right resources so we can implement particularly InterGov all in one piece rather than kind of in iterative implementations. The other part of that is as we bring in these contractors or renew contracts with current consultants, we're putting in the guidelines so they can actually document and train our current staff. So then we can kind of slowly ease off of needing to hire consultants and have service contracts as well.
Okay, so it's in the plans?
Yes, yes.
Okay. With that, no other questions, Madam Chair? If there's no questions, I'll make a motion. Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Could I get a roll call vote, please?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
See.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Chavez.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. And with that, thank you for being here.
Madam Chair, committee members, thank you.
All right, next is item O, request for approval of budget amendment resolution to allocate $85,000 from the HAP GRT increment for infrastructure fund available balance to fund phase 2 of the Kaya Tahoe Speed Humps construction project. And we will turn it over to you, Director Wheeler, after Counselor Garcia asks his questions.
Question, how many phases and how much more money is needed potentially for this project?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, Counselor Garcia. We expect to be the end of this project. The community came to us first concerned about speeding right next to Las Acequias Park. And then it found that there was continued speeding on the end of another leg of the road. So this should be phase 2 and the final phase.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure, because if there was more phases, my follow-up was going to be, let's see if we can get it done instead of delaying the full implementation, but no other questions. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Wheeler.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Could I get a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Madam Chair, Counselor Castro,
See.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Chavez.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, next is item P, request for approval of a budget amendment resolution to allocate $1,300,000 from the general fund available balance to fund installation of new synthetic surfacing at Regal Park's baseball field number 1. And says Regina, but welcome. Thank you for being here, Counselor Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Overly. Just a couple quick questions. One, and I believe this is a conversation you and I had in the past around looking at really working to update all of the fields at Regal. I appreciate we're taking the steps to do that. But sometimes it's more cost effective for the city to get 2 done versus 1. And so do we have a breakdown of the price, how much it might cost us to do, not only field 1, but some of the T-ball fields up higher in the field. I'll call them the higher fields because they're higher up. Do we have a breakdown on what that would cost? I mean, couldn't cost a lot to do it T-ball field as well, the ones that the little peewees use.
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, I don't have all of those breakouts if we were to, for the smaller fields. Generally on the larger fields, they're going to be running right around 1.2, 1.3 million. If we were to do all of them at once, overall savings would be in the neighborhood of maybe 5% to 8%. It's really only in the mobilization costs. So we have looked into that.
Okay. Second question, baseball field one. That want to confirm for the public, that is the one that's primarily used by the softball athletes.
Madam Chair and Councilor Garcia, that's correct. That's what I understand. But now, since we have the new field on, and then that was developed to not only handle for baseball, but also softball, that's also going to be, and we're seeing it's more heavily used for that as well. And so there's a pretty good sized demand that they're really excited about how this first field came about, and they're really interested in getting more fields done.
Okay, thank you so much. I just want to applaud you and Director McDonald for moving this project forward. I know the athletes are very, very appreciative. The condition of those fields were pretty horrendous previously, and those young folks, when they get to play on that field, there's no field other like that in the city of Santa Fe. And so if we can have multiple, and it'd be fantastic, because not only is it allow for the recreation activities to be improved, but it can also allow for an economic driver. It can allow for us to really host state of the, world-class softball, baseball tournaments here. And what better way to bring folks into our community and showcase our fantastic fields. So I guess I'll just have one follow-up question, if you can get it to me offline, is how much it would ultimately cost to maybe resurface the T-ball field as well.
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, I will absolutely follow up with you and put those numbers together.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Overly. With that, no other questions, Madam Chair.
Right, any other questions from committee members?
Move
Thank
to
you.
approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Could I get a roll call vote, please?
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
See,
Chair Chavez.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much. Next, I believe is item R. Request for approval of a budget amendment resolution to allocate $3.4 million from the general fund available balance to fund various deferred maintenance facilities projects. And Regina, you have another team member here, and Counselor Garcia, I turn it over to you.
Thank you. I don't know who to direct the questions to, so I'm just gonna, Sam, I'll direct them to you first. I guess the question is, right now I'm seeing a list of 9 items, right? Am I seeing looking at the correct? Is it 9 items that we're looking at?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, the list of items associated with this tranche of money is actually pretty significant. I didn't actually count the number of facilities, but this money actually will be spread out, just to, I think, to answer the question or help you understand the way the money's broken down is by facility or by groups of facilities. For example, the Siringo complex or the Seiler complex. And so it's really made up of dozens of projects rather than just a few, a couple handfuls of projects.
Okay, thank you for that. This by far is not the deferred maintenance list for the city of Santa Fe, because I'd be shocked if it only would cost us 3.4 million to do that. Do you have a estimate of the overall deferred maintenance on city facilities and what that kind of cost looks at ballpark?
Yeah, absolutely. Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, looking at all of, and the facilities division first and foremost doesn't manage every single building within the city. We have around 100 in our portfolio. just over 1 million square feet. And I haven't checked the number recently, but I would put the estimate of deferred maintenance somewhere around $50 million.
Okay. And then last question, just because I know that you had mentioned it's not the extensive list that's here, but because this came up during the budget hearings, and it was a pretty contentious topic, which was the rehabilitation of the chambers, the city council chambers. Is that included in this monies?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, that is not included in this list. And to explain why, the facilities division, we maintain an asset database that is made up of kind of different levels of information. We consider an asset in an entire building, and then the buildings is made up of sets of elements, like whether it's a door or a window or a roof. And the program we use is actually a nationwide program, and it kind of it aggregates data and helps us project priorities based on risk factors to operations, public safety, damage to buildings. And so our database helps us rank and prioritize deferred maintenance based on these criteria so that we can really focus on what best serves the city or a given facility when we make decisions on what we should and should not repair.
Right, and is that a reason why well, and I don't, this is more so for roofs. Sorry.
Mr. Willer, I think, wanted to comment on that.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia. Just to add to what Sam said about the council chambers, we have a lot of demands in City Hall for improvements, as you can imagine. And so actually the facilities team has undertaken having professionals evaluate what it would take to actually bring this building up to code so that we could actually do improvements like a council chambers renovation. And we'll be making a presentation very soon to governing body, actually in September, mid-September, to give you a presentation about what that situation is and then what our recommendations are as an outcome of that. But if we were to remodel the chambers, we'd have to bring the whole building up to code, and that is a huge undertaking. Thank you so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And on that topic, I would, since we're doing that analysis, if we can get a cross comparison of what it would cost to develop a new facility, a new city service center. I know we've talked about this many, not you and I specifically, but in general, holistically, we've talked about developing a city service center and what that would ultimately cost. I know it's been floated Midtown, but maybe other locations, and the cost comparison for that. That way, not only we as the governing body have that kind of start figuring that out, but the public as well. So
Thank you so much, Councilor Garcia, Madam Chair, for that question, because that's exactly what the presentation will provide. And just to remind councilors, actually the replacement Consolidated City Services Center has been on the ICIP for 4 years. So we're actually carrying a capital project, and facilities has been taking some steps, and that's what we'll be presenting to the governing body is the update.
Gotcha. And then lastly, I don't see that the ice arena equipment is in here. Is that going to be through separate resources? I mean, I don't know if that falls in your bucket or for different, but since I got you in front of me, I figured I'd ask.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an excellent question, Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia. The way the Genevieve Chavez Center was set up to run both the natatorium or the pool room and the ice rink have operated separately from the facilities division. They have their own facilities managers for that equipment. The facilities division has started to step in and take over some of the related kind of building wide equipment that stacks on top of theirs. And for example, at the ice rink, we have an open procurement with a vendor to replace the rooftop HVAC units, which are part of the issues taking place at the ice rink. But we haven't yet been asked to participate in addressing any of the other issues that they're facing. But to that point, I think it's worth noting, because we're the facilities division, we really, we touch departments and divisions all throughout the city. And on this particular request for funding, I believe about $688,000 would go directly to Genevieve Chavez or one type of deferred maintenance or another.
Thank you, Mr. Burnett. Appreciate all the comments. Thank you, Director Wheeler. Nothing for me. I make a motion.
Any other questions or comments?
Move to approve.
I have a motion and a second. Could I get a roll call vote, please?
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Chavez.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Director Wheeler. Next is item Y, request for approval of a budget amendment resolution to allocate $1,500,000 from the general fund available balance to fund installation of new liners for irrigation ponds at the Municipal Recreation Complex, MRC. And we have Director McDonald here to answer any questions, which I think are from Counselor Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one quick question. How old are the current liners?
The current liners are the original liners, so they would have been dating back to 1997 or 1998.
Okay. And what is the lifespan of these liners? Is it roughly that 25-year period? And this is an expenditure we would hopefully not have to make for another 2 decades or so?
Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, that's correct. They're 25 to 30 years is our lifetime.
Okay. That was all my questions. Thank you. Thank you, Director.
Any other questions or comments?
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Could I get a roll call vote, please?
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
Lee.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Chavez.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you, Director. Next is AA, request for approval of a budget amendment resolution to allocate $1,120,000 from the half-GRT increment for infrastructure fund available balance to fund repairs and upgrades to the Sandoval parking garage. Regina Wheeler. Sam is back.
I'd like to have Director of Parking Steve Caspin and Director of Facilities Sam Burnett answer questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Counselor Garcia, you pulled this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Caspin, for being here. From my recollection, didn't we just invest some major resources into this particular garage, whether I think it was an elevator upgrade? So can you help me understand how we're planning to expend what is it, $1.1 million for this garage?
Good evening, Councilor Garcia, Madam Chair. Yes, we did spend $250,000 on a elevator upgrade, which I believe has just recently been completed. So the work is separated into about 17 items, ranging from stucco, restuccoing the exterior of the structure. That's our most expensive at $450,000. All the way to our least expensive, installing missing ceramic tile. So these upgrades and improvements will go a long way to improving the appearance of the garage, the safety, the security, and the functionality.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. I guess, well, separate item, security contract. I think that's yours, Sam, right? But yeah, so we're not talking that one. I will be pulling that from a different committee, but I guess one concern I've heard from folks is whether it's Sandoval or even the garage here at the convention center is a security effort. So what type of security upgrades are planned?
So lighting is a big one. So I would say, just overlooking the list here, the lighting is the only one that I can see that would relate to security. Replacing some wire glass in the stairwells would also maybe help with security, so people can't maybe get in. But most of our security, again, comes to Condor Security actually doing patrols in our garage and just having our staff there as much as possible.
Right, and I apologize, Mr. Caspin, wasn't necessarily referring to like physical security guards, just more security enhancements, whether it be technology such as cameras, motion detecting devices that light up lights, so there's additional measures that could be taken, and so it sounds like lighting and installing some maybe additional measures where folks can access the facility after hours, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah. So the one I mentioned about let's see, it was replacing the wire glass at the stairwells. We've had some incidents with people getting into the garage through that particular area. As far as cameras go, I mean, that's not part of this project, but we are always looking to improve the amount of cameras and the functionality of those cameras.
Okay. No other questions. Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to make a motion if there's no other questions.
Any questions or comments?
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Could I get a roll call vote?
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
See.
Chair Chavez,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right. Thank you, Director Caspin, Director Burnett.
Thank you.
All right, next is item AJ, request for approval of a budget amendment resolution to allocate $1,107,000 from 1.5% GRT increment fund available balance to purchase 2 armored vehicles and an explosive ordnance disposal vehicle for the Santa Fe Police Department. And we have Chief Joy here with us to answer any questions. I believe this was pulled by Counselor Michael Garcia and Counselor Castro. I don't know which one. All right, I'll turn it over to Counselor Castro.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Chief, for having the time to come out, and for the rest of your team as well. Thank you so much. So tell me a little bit more about these armored vehicles.
Madam Chair, Counselor Castro, and I didn't bring a script, so that could be a good or bad thing. It's gonna be rambling at you. But yeah, we do have one Bearcat currently in use. It has been with the department for about 19 years, longer than I've been with the department. Of the Bearcats currently statewide, ours is the oldest still functioning. We're at any other vehicle in our fleet, we would have decommissioned it by now, but we haven't been able to do that because we have no other option at the moment. So it is an armored rescue and response vehicle. It is a police response vehicle. I know there's a lot of talk and concern about what it is and what it is not. It is not a military vehicle or a militarized vehicle. Military use their own version of a Bearcat. It's not what this is. If you do it side by side, they're very different vehicles. These are used primarily, again, by our SWAT team for high-risk warrants or high-risk barricaded subjects. And I have some data from 2023 that we can go over if you'd like, just to kind of talk about how often it's been used over the year. And then I have Sergeant Wakefield and Sergeant Byford. Sergeant Wakefield is one of our SWAT commanders, and Sergeant Byford is our EOD commander.
Would it be okay if they step to the podium?
Absolutely. If you guys want to just step up, thank you for being here.
Trio, a little Three Stooges action here, but.
But yes, I would love to hear some of the times that it's been used.
So, and well, I'll speak to that because I took my own little notes. So for 2023, our SWAT team had 9 callouts, and that's callouts are generally for, again, barricaded subject or high-risk felony suspects who are refusing to exit a residence or a vehicle, and they need a specialized response. And then 8 uses for search and arrest warrants. And again, those are whenever we do a high risk, when I say high risk, before each search warrant, and then the sergeant here can nudge me if I'm wrong, but they do an assessment of the individual to whom the vehicle or the person or the house is being searched, that their warrant is going to be executed on. They do a history, they have to do a scout of the residents, and all operations have to be approved by myself. For callouts, it can be approved by the deputy chief, who will then give me notification. But these are all processes that have to go through extensive approval process and review before they're allowed to proceed forward.
Perfect. And so all 9 of these incidents, all of those procedures were followed, correct?
Correct. So for the 9, so there are 9 callouts and then 8 warrants. So a total of 17 times for 2023. And out of those 17, 18 arrests were made, all felony arrests. 6 of those were barricaded subjects. Also, it should be noted that for every SWAT response, every SWAT call out, our crisis negotiation team also responds. And there's another option for what we use these Bearcats for, is it allows the crisis negotiator to be in close proximity to the subject area, but also protected, because these are the only vehicles that we have that can offer any protection against rifle rounds and other kind of caliber of firearms. But it allows them to be close enough to know what's actually happening in real time, but also protected from any type of offensive response.
Perfect. And with the SWAT team and the negotiating team, about how many officers do you usually have in one of these incidents?
That's all. I'll kick it to Sergeant Wakefield.
So for our special operations group, our special operations group primarily gets completely activated. So that includes EOD, SWAT, CNT, ERT, any kind of additional personnel. So you're looking at around 30 to 40 officers. Our SWAT team has about 19 personnel assigned to it.
Perfect. And I'm so sorry, Lieutenant, your name.
My name is Sergeant Luke Wakefield.
Sorry, Sergeant Wakefield. Thank you so much. And Sergeant, so have you personally been involved in any of these 17 incidents in 2023?
Honestly, I don't think I missed one last year. So that's just all of them.
Okay. And so how often are these escalating? Do you feel that usually there are these kinds of weapons at these incidents?
Escalating, they're not really escalating at all. Well, our whole job is to de-escalate everything. And we're pretty good at it. And our CNT guys are pretty good at it. And the Bearcats, what that shows is almost like a show of force is what we call it. It's intimidating. You see it, you get scared. A lot of times we don't have to do anything. They see that vehicle pull up. Mind you, it's just purely armor, but it is intimidating. And they will just kind of exit because that's a show.
So how many times have you personally seen some of these automatic weapons that we're protecting ourselves from?
Automatic weapons?
Correct. That the armored vehicles are protecting us from.
So are you like, how many times we've been shot at?
No, in particular, sorry, Chief Joy, remind me the automatic weapons that this in particular helps us block from?
So not necessarily automatic weapons, but rifle rounds, AR-15s. And to kind of partially answer your question, we did do one operation in particular where we executed 2 search warrants simultaneously. This is during our youth violence operation. During that time, and the total of the operation is about 6 weeks, but one operation in particular where we made, I believe we hit 2 houses at once. We made 4 arrests, and I believe, and I'm speaking off the cuff here, but it was, let's say 4 or 5 weapons were seized, including assault rifles, or AR-15s rather, and handguns.
So my question was, were any of these weapons used to your knowledge in any of these 17 incidents?
Oh yeah, we've had, I mean, primarily on our it's called our matrix. What we do is we run a history. Almost weapons are involved 90% of the time. If the reason they're not a weapon involved, the subject had to have extreme criminal history for us to be involved. So most of the time weapons are being used.
So just to be clear, in these 17 incidents in 2023, 90% of the time, these types of weapons were used.
Yes, during a commission of a crime, which was why they were requesting our team.
Okay. So initially you're being requested. This is not then the warrants that we were talking about earlier. This is a request. Also with the warrants, 90% of the time, weapons are being used in those.
It's part, when you say weapons are being used, or weapon the person is suspected of having one.
I apologize. A weapon has been discharged.
So not necessarily, again, it depends on the history of the person, whether or not they've used violence or a weapon in the commission of a crime, either what they're wanted for currently or based on their history.
Sorry, I'm talking about specifically in the 17 incidents where the Bearcat was used in 2023.
Right.
Were weapons discharged by an offender?
At the Bearcat?
At the officers, yes.
No.
In any of the 17, to your knowledge, was a weapon discharged?
I don't think in 2023.
If you're requesting 2023, no. Personally, yes, we have been shot at and the vehicle has protected us.
Okay, no, I was asking about the 17 incidents in 2023 specifically.
Not in 2023.
Have there been any incidents? So I apologize. Going back to the description of the vehicle, I've sort of looked at some vehicles that Bearcat does offer. There is a Medcat and a Firecat. Was there any interest in any of those vehicles?
No, I don't believe so. I don't know that either of those vehicles are specific to the needs that our special operations group would have.
Perfect. Could you expand on that? What exactly are the needs that this vehicle has that a Medcat might not have?
So it's larger, it holds more operators, so more people can fit in there. It has a bigger protection. It's now you're referring to like the Medcat is almost like it's a smaller version of it. And we were looking at it originally, I think it was about 3 years ago. But we were still looking for two larger APCs, which was armored personnel carriers. And we could do the same things with the Bearcat. So if we need to do an officer rescue or a citizen rescue, we can put them in the Bearcat, have more space and get them evacuated.
And how often have you done a citizen or an officer rescue?
Officer rescues, none. We've had to bring citizens back that have overdosed or have done unfortunate things have happened or shootings are occurred. And we've had to bring them behind the Bearcat, but not necessarily transport them in the Bearcat.
Between 2006 and currently, the Santa Fe Police Department has received 3.8 million in military equipment. Is that right, Chief Joy?
I don't believe that's true. I would have to check the numbers that person is quoting.
Okay, how much do you think between 2006 and now, have we gotten any military equipment?
We used to participate in the 1033 program, but that ended, I believe, in 2019 or 2020. And so we have not received any funding from the 1033 program since then.
Will you tell me a little bit more about the 1033 program, please, Chief Joy?
Sure, and I can't speak too much. I wasn't in my position now or as a deputy chief when we were engaged in the 1033 program. So I can't speak too much to it other than it was a program offered that gave law enforcement agencies and other state agencies either decommissioned or otherwise not in use military equipment.
And to your knowledge, did we receive any military equipment from that program?
We did receive an MRAP that was used previously to supplement the Bearcat use and the backpacks and their other equipment things. But yeah, the big purchase was the MRAP.
We received some kind of optics. And we received backpacks and then I think the night vision. There was just some smaller things that we no longer use.
Perfect. And Chief, you did mention that there were other Bearcats available in New Mexico. Do you know of any others available to us?
What do you mean other Bearcats?
I apologize. Is there any other armored vehicles? You mentioned that ours is the oldest in the state.
There's
What
other
vehicles
agencies,
are there?
other police agencies that use Bearcats. Yes.
To your knowledge, what are those agencies?
State Police, Albuquerque, I believe Santa Fe County has one. I think Los Alamos has one. I'm not sure beyond that. I believe Rio Rancho has one.
And do we have access to request those vehicles if in case of an emergency?
It depends. And we're subject to their availability in the event that we do need one. So if it's a pre-planned event and we can try to coordinate, then we may be able to use one, but it also is subject to their call outs, their availability.
And in 2023, of these 17 incidents, how many were pre-planned?
The ones that were pre-planned were the arrest warrants, so 8 of the 17.
Okay. So do you think that 9 times we could have possibly borrowed one of these armored vehicles in 2023?
Not necessarily. We'd have to look at it as a case by case basis, but not necessarily.
I have plenty of other concerns, but I will see to my co-counselors. Thank you so very much, Chair.
Thank you, Counselor Castro. Counselor Lee Garcia. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Counselor Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just listening to the questioning and in regards to, these are tools that are needed by a special operations function of our police department. Is that correct?
That's correct, Counselor.
And so, going down the road in the future of our city, when you have a specific operation that needs to be done and handled, not just to protect you guys who are protecting others, to de-escalate situations where there potentially is very much harm that can be done to the community. How important is this apparatus to the effectiveness of each situation? Because they're all different. They're probably going to be all different. But how important is this to the operations of the SWAT team or the Special Operations Unit to being functional and to being accurate and to have the least amount of harm to the community or to the person that you're trying to engage at that time?
Madam Chair, Counselor Garcia, it is very important.
Thank you, Counselor. It's extremely important, and we get called to some of the most dangerous situations. We are the last resort. When we're at these situations, this is something to save myself and save the men and women that do the job with me. It's extremely important when we are on scene and this person is armed and they are known to have very violent tendencies. It is a safe haven for us where we feel protected. There is very certain situations where even in 2023, last year, and in this year, where that comfort changes us and it gives us the ability to think and try to de-escalate as much as we can and make the correct decisions rather than feeling the pressure and being under fire.
Thank you. So you could maybe equate this to having body armor, like, it's using a bulletproof vest, but it's basically a bulletproof vest for the whole unit, so to speak.
Exactly. And will protect our entire person, not just our extremities on top or chest.
And so, just for historical purposes, if we would not have had a Bearcat or something similar in the last 19 years, how hard would it have made your job as a special operations?
I don't know if I would do it. I love my family. I'm not trying to get killed. We need some kind of protection to save us. We're willing to risk our lives. But we want the city to help us do that and protect us.
So obviously then this comes back to maybe life and death for you and your unit. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Garcia. Counselor Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Follow up on Counselor Castro's questions around the calls and whatnot. So out of the 9 calls for service, did any of these happen at the same time?
Multitasking, sorry. For at least a couple of the search warrants, yes. The call outs themselves, I don't believe the call outs were simultaneous.
No, not on the call outs, but the incident that he was talking about for the youth violence, we actually used 4 different SWAT teams that came around the state to help us out. And then we've utilized the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office to hit simultaneously multiple houses. And I think we did that around 3 times, 3 separate occasions last year. We had one where it was state police, Bernalillo County, Albuquerque Police Department, ourselves, the HSI, all of us came and did. Each had their own Bearcats and their own tactical personnel. We all hit different locations. And then we've had several where the sheriff's office worked with us and we had two different locations where we did a simultaneous hits. And we use our Bearcat at one location and their Bearcat at another.
Gotcha. And so for the 9 calls, there was no instances where there was multiple use. The other 8 instances where it was used was for search and arrest warrants, and there were multiple uses. In those instances, could we coordinate with neighboring agencies to say, we're going to conduct a blitz, a search warrant blitz, and Santa Fe County, will you help us out and bring your Bearcat along to help out with, how would that be obliged to by our partners? Would Sheriff Mendoza say, yes, I'm willing to lend SFPD? And well, I don't want you to speak for Sheriff Mendoza.
Yeah,
Sorry,
Council, I can't speak for Sheriff
Yeah.
Mendoza. The part of the issue is, and of the, where is it? Where I have, of the 8, from speaking with DC Champlin, there was one, dual execution where we did not have access to another Bearcat. And so that had to be done with, PD units. I can get more details on that for later if you need. Oh, you have that one. He can give that one too.
Yeah, so that one, we actually had to go to Sandoval County. There was no other agencies that could help us. Santa Fe County was busy, state police was busy. Sandoval County let us have a couple operators. I believe they were considered SWAT. They had some K9. And then, so we had half of our team go to Sandoval County to execute a search warrant. And then my team, we did a search warrant, but we used the Bearcat, the Sandoval, because that's where the primary suspect was. And then for the other secondary, for a secondary suspect, we had to use just our vehicles and just hope to God it went okay, and it did.
But that was not in the city of Santa Fe. That was supporting
No,
Sandoval County.
It was a Santa Fe crime. The suspect just lived there. And then it was the Mutt Nelson shooting where there was like 50 rounds that were fired. That was the same situation.
The Mutt Nelson shooting, though, where did the shots come from? Were they police or was it from the suspect?
All suspects, no police.
Okay.
Just a point of clarification, just because it ties into this question. For those warrants, there is a window of time where you have to respond, correct? So you are monitoring a situation for a warrant, and then there is a small window of time where everything aligns. Maybe the suspect has stopped somewhere. They become available where it's safe to go to respond. So at sometimes during the warrant, there isn't room to find a vehicle to borrow.
Right. Yeah, Madam Chair, that's true. And the search warrants, once they're signed, they're not active in perpetuity. You have a limited window of time, calendar wise, at least 10 days to execute a search warrant. And then again, trying to coordinate and plan. And a lot of it is, we plan as best we can, but it's also the opportunity that is provided to us at any given time to execute the warrant. To speak about whether or not I don't believe Sheriff Mendoza would ever tell me no outright, but they also have their own obligations and their own safety concerns. And so by allowing us to use their Bearcat, that removes it from their need for whatever they would use it for. And the other thing to consider is if we use another agency's Bearcat, they're using their operators, they're subject to their own policies and practices. They aren't subject to ours. And they don't have the same oversight that we do. Right.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you for the clarification on that. Next question, talking about funding, just because this request is a big amount, over $1 million. And so just looking on the Lenco website, there's a webpage dedicated, no cost, no obligation, help with armored vehicle grants. Have y'all reached out for any support, funding, application status, if you can provide an update on that?
Yes, Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, we have tried for the past several years to qualify for the SHISHCAP grant through Homeland Security. And that has been every year since the original Bearcat that we got was received through that grant. And again, it's of the Bearcats that were granted, ours is the only one still in operation. We have since been denied whenever we've been applying to. So we have tried for other avenues to get these approved, to get these paid for.
Gotcha. And so what is the plan for the existing Bearcat? And the only reason I ask is, could we, if we were to even move forward with allocating resources for one Bearcat, could you still utilize the current Bearcat, knowing that that is your backup? I mean, I just feel very uncomfortable, even if we were to move forward with this, to purchase two of them, knowing that the stats just aren't there for the use of it. Thank God we don't have the type of crime in the community that requires two of these at one time. I understand the search warrant situation, but a lot of that is, I think a lot of that is planned out in regards. I do understand the certain circumstances where an individual is at a time where we can locate them. But there are, from my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, search warrant kind of efforts. I mean, I've heard them in my neighborhood. I mean, all of a sudden, I not only have SFPD, but I've got sheriff and state police in my neighborhood. And it seems like there's an effort where it's an all-out blitz, a search warrant blitz. Am I understanding the process correctly?
Blitz, we don't do them like you would like a DWI blitz or a traffic blitz. I don't know how to put it in a different word. We don't save these up to execute in a group. If we're doing more than one, it's because they're linked to a case. And it's time sensitive to execute as quickly as close together as possible for a number of reasons. To answer your question about what we're planning to do with this one, this Bearcat is, and again, I don't want to say, it's hard to talk about these things without coming off as like trying to be scary or saying, but these are scary topics. Our current Bearcat is beyond end of life. Like we've maintained it and we've done as many repairs and maintenance on it as we can to keep it usable to what we need it for. But we don't plan to hang on to it any longer than we absolutely have to.
Gotcha. Okay, so then what happens to it after it gets decommissioned, and what's the next life for it?
So I'm gonna go back a little bit if you don't mind, Council.
Sure, absolutely.
One of the weird questions is why two? And one of the reasons is we have officers in front and usually officers in back of a perimeter. For the last 9 years that I've been on the team, the only thing that we can protect is the officers in the front of the Bearcat. What we would like is to actually protect the officers that are in the back as well. It'll save for crossfire, a bunch of different issues. A lot of times we just send an officer back there and we're like, find something to hide. And that's what we kind of base it off of. So that was the reason for the two. My understanding, what we plan on doing with the second one is just trading it in to try maybe lessen the value.
Okay. I think, no, that's all I've got. No other questions, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Councilor Garcia. I do have questions and comments, but I will turn it over to Councilor Castro.
Thank you. I will try to be brief. I just want to make some closing comments that it's going to be difficult to not be scary when it was clear that these vehicles are being used for intimidation. It's hard for me to even support one when we haven't had any weapons discharged. We just had a really difficult incident where a young man was shot at the Sonic. Would this weapon help in that incident, Chief Joy?
When you say, would the vehicle have helped?
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to help civilians protect them from weapons fire. Is that correct?
Yes.
Would that have helped in this incident?
No.
Okay, so in what incident would civilians be protected by these vehicles?
So if we have a barricaded subject who is deploying rounds, firing rounds, we need to evacuate neighbors or people in the community. We can utilize the Bearcat for that evacuation. If we have a mass casualty incident or we say an active shooter incident and we need to evacuate in real time, we can utilize these vehicles to clear the area. We did have an incident in December where there was a suspect who had ambushed his girlfriend and then was making active threats that he was going to go and shoot up the plaza, his words, shoot up the plaza. And we were going to be needing to utilize our Bearcat for that.
And were you able to deploy your Bearcat in that incident?
Yes, and he ended up fleeing north to Rio Arriba. Rio Arriba and Espanola do not have their own Bearcat. And so it's our suspect and we are going to need to retrieve him. And so they had requested that we use our Bearcat to get him out of that residence.
And I apologize. What year was that?
That was the end of last year.
In 2020?
2023.
2023. Okay, perfect. No further questions.
And if you don't mind, just one statement is that kid that was unfortunately that was shot. How it's gonna help us is if we locate where he's at, we can activate the SWAT team to then go in and search the search warrant and arrest warrant to get him in custody without anyone else getting hurt, including ourselves.
But your testimony today has been that there has been no weapons discharged in the 17 incidents in 2023, correct?
Not in 2023.
Perfect. Thank you. No further questions, Chair.
All right, thank you. So I have a few comments and maybe some questions. I don't like the measure of whether you've been shot at because I would hope that the tools we have in place are preventative. I know you are police officers and you choose to do the job you do, but I don't think a measure for a required tool should be based on how many times you've been shot at. We want to purchase things that protect you and protect our community. And the whole definition of protect is to prevent. I am not doing your job, so I think it's very hard for me to deny whether you need something to feel safe, to keep the community safe, and to prevent mass casualties, which could occur. I think you are the experts, you experience those situations firsthand. I will say I am very grateful that you have not been shot at or in the situations that occurred. There wasn't ARs used to harm you or civilians around. I think a threat is enough to utilize the tools to protect our community and to protect those that are on the front line doing the work. So I just ask, because you are 3 individuals that have done this work, do you feel like this is necessary to feel protected and to protect the community?
I'm sure, yes, we do.
All right, and if I could hear just from your team.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. I feel like since you are the ones making the sacrifice and you feel like this is a preventative measure, it is hard for me to go against a request like this. The statistics I care about are the opposite of what's been asked for here. I want to hear how it's been preventative. I want to hear how shots have not been fired and how there has been intervention, so that we don't have officers harmed or communities harmed. So in the questions that were asked, I got that data. It seems to work. I have concern about public safety right now. Just this year, I feel like we have a rise in crime in many different categories. I know our community is concerned. I think we're at a point in the world, in the nation right now, that's not if something's gonna occur, it's when. I would like to know that our community is protected when something occurs. And you are the experts to decide what's needed to make sure that happens. So those are my comments. I appreciate you answering the question I had. Are there any other comments or questions? All right, is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Second? Could I get a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. Counselor Lee Garcia,
Yes.
Counselor Castro,
No.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
No, and I'd like to explain my vote.
and Chair Chavez.
Yes.
I don't think the motion passed. And
Counselor Garcia, you would like to explain your vote? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as you mentioned in your comments, crime has this is what I'd love to see the statistics about, and Chief Joy, if we can get that from you, just because not saying that there isn't the need, but I honestly believe that we also need to begin to protect our community in other fashions, whether it's somebody going to Sonic or somebody going to the grocery store, getting gas, wherever it may be. We need to ensure that we're investing the resources to protect the community and get the longest use out of it. And that's where my concern comes in regards to the request that's before us. We've been able to utilize one of these machines for 2 decades. I don't see the statistics that support utilizing a second one, so that's why I'm not in support of two of them. And the reason, and I also think that if there was an additional part of this request that came forward that showed how we can take those potential funds that were proposed for a second vehicle that would help combat the crime issues we're seeing in our community, I would be in full support of that. But I given our limited amount of resources, I want to do everything we can to help you all out with the tools you need, because I see two of these devices being utilized 18 times at max throughout the last year. That means 330 some odd days where it's sitting there not being utilized. And I would want to ensure that we're providing you all tools that are going to be utilized 365 days out of the year to ensure that our community is protected 365 days out of the year. So sergeants and chief, thank you for your service. You have the toughest job in our city. It's tough out there right now. So thank you. Please stay safe. And I'd like to continue to chat with you offline if we can maybe amend this request to include resources to address the challenges our residents are seeing every single day. That's what I hear a lot about. Not the challenges of the crossfire of a warrant situation. It's how can I go to Sonic safely without being shot? Can I go to drive down the street without being harassed for resources? It's tough. It's tough out there, and thank you all. Please stay safe.
Thank you, Chief Joy and your team for being here. Have a good evening. And we will move to our next item, which is matters from staff.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. If I could just take a moment, everybody is probably clear on the committee, but City Attorney McSherry called me before the meeting so that I could provide any guidance on the process. And since that one bar was not approved by this committee, it will continue through the process, but it will not be able to be on consent at governing body. So that is the impact of the voting. No, I just want to let you know that if you didn't already know. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Of all kinds of things going on as usual. But I wanted to let you know that the brand new 2025 Santa Fe bike map is out and available. I brought you each copies. I'm sure Councilor Garcia had a hand in this because the BPAC, I'm sure, was involved. MPO does this work, who's now a member of Public Works team. So I wanted to bring copies for everybody if I could.
Great, thank you. Director Dupuy?
Madam Chair, only one update. I recently was able to visit some of the wastewater facilities in the Seattle region. King County operates those facilities, and we'll make it part of a forthcoming presentation that kind of feeds into some of the master plan work that's being done. And then we have our final draft being reviewed this week of the master plan for the wastewater facility. And so just update on that. It's forthcoming in terms of having something that's presentable for counselors.
Great, thank you. Matters from the committee? Councilor Michael Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I know we had a lot of work that we completed tonight because of the bars. I just want to raise concern I have around the process. Just because, it's stipulated through city charter that the city council, has a hand in the overall budget and budget approval. But there's not a way for us to really lead the process in regards to these bars. There are several initiatives that I would like to bring forward, but there's not a mechanism for that. It's like, I would be told to bring forth a resolution, and who knows, God, how long that would take to even just get out and get introduced. And I think, I wish there was a way we can have a stronger hand in this process. This was all administration led. We're responding to the requests. And I think it's a completely unjust way of carrying out the allocation of the taxpayers' resources. I think we can do better. And I hope that, with the additional resources that are available, because we do have unanticipated GRT that we have not allocated yet. And I'm going to say right now, I will highly advise the administration to put forth another proposal like this, because it is not fair and it's not just, and this is not what the residents of Santa Fe want. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Garcia. Any other matters from the committee? All right, matters from chair. Next meeting is Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024. That does not seem like the right date. I think our next meeting is going to be August 19th, 2024. I will be chairing remotely that day. Just FYI, Director Wheeler. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.